Hey everyone, welcome back. We're diving into generative AI for business today. You guys know I love this stuff. And I think everyone's looking for ways to make this tech actually work for them, right?
Definitely.
But there's just so much hype around it. It's, easy to get lost.
It really is, yeah.
So we're going to try to cut through all that, get to the good stuff.
Sounds good.
We're looking at some really insightful stuff from Chetan.
Okay.
He's the CEO over at Polestar Solutions.
Right.
And Ankit, their CTO.
Yeah.
They were recently on the Future of AI podcast, and they had some really interesting takes on what it actually takes to implement AI effectively.
I think what's really fascinating about their take is that they kind of take a step back from all the hype.
Yeah.
And they try to ground the conversation in a more practical, strategic approach.
Yeah, so let's get into that. So they talk about this, what they call the hype trap.
Yeah.
And it's basically this idea that it's tempting to jump on, whatever the shiniest AI project is out there.
Right.
That promises, overnight miracles. But without a solid strategy, are you really solving a problem? Or are you just
Yeah, playing with the shiny new toy.
Exactly.
Playing with the shiny new toy.
Right.
And then, what happens when that toy loses its luster, right?
Yeah. You're left with, what is this actually doing for us?
Yeah.
And is it actually moving the needle on any of our key metrics, or are we just kind of, spinning our wheels?
Right.
So imagine,
And it's got to be expensive too. Oh, absolutely. Imagine pouring resources into building this super advanced, AI chatbot.
Right.
That ends up confusing your customers more than it helps them.
Oh, yeah.
Or, you spend all this time, money, and effort building this system that just wows everyone in the demos.
Yeah.
But when you actually put it out there in the real world, it doesn't actually, move the needle.
Right.
It doesn't improve your bottom line.
Yeah.
And, unfortunately, Chetan and Ankit, they see this all the time.
Yeah. And I mean, I imagine it's more often than not, right?
I think so, yeah, because there's this, it's easy to get caught up in the excitement, without thinking about the practicalities.
Right. So what's the solution then? They're big on aligning AI investments with clearer business outcomes.
Absolutely.
From day one, right?
From day one.
So what problem are you actually trying to solve?
Exactly. So, before you even start thinking about the technology, you need to define your goals.
Yeah.
What are you aiming for? Are you aiming for cost reduction?
Yeah.
Are you trying to boost efficiency? Unlock new revenue streams?
Mm-hmm.
What is the problem you're trying to solve? And then once you have a clear understanding of that, then you could start exploring if and how AI can be a solution.
Don't get distracted by the shiny object syndrome.
Right.
And speaking of shiny object syndrome, they make this other great point about not reinventing the wheel.
Yeah, I love that point.
Right.
It's so important.
There are already so many good AI solutions out there.
There really are, yeah.
Why build everything from scratch when you can just leverage what's already working?
Exactly. And I think a lot of companies, they fall into this trap of thinking, oh, we have to build our own AI from scratch in order for it to be truly effective.
Right.
But the reality is there are so many amazing AI solutions out there, off-the-shelf solutions, open source tools. Leveraging those frees up your time, your resources to actually focus on what matters, which is tailoring that solution to your specific needs.
So it's kind of like, why build the whole car when you can just get a pre-built engine and then,
Exactly.
customize the design?
Yeah. You need sentiment analysis, let's say, for customer feedback, right?
Yeah.
You don't need to build this whole natural language processing models from the ground up.
Right.
Companies like Google Cloud, Amazon Web Services, they have these pre-trained models that are incredibly powerful and they can be easily integrated.
Work smarter, not harder.
Exactly.
And here's something else that I think is really relevant, especially as companies get, further along their AI journey. They start to scale up their AI efforts. And this is something else that Chetan and Ankit were really big on. AI is not this one-size-fits-all solution, right?
And that's a really important point because it's easy to think about AI as this kind of magical thing that you can just sprinkle on top of your organization. But the reality is that, different departments within a company are going to have very different levels of, what you might call AI maturity.
Yeah.
And they're going to have vastly different needs, So what works for one department might not work for another.
It's like, you could have your marketing team. They might be, knee deep in AI, using it for all sorts of ad targeting and, building lookalike audiences and all that, super in the weeds, very technical stuff. And then you've got your research and development folks who are using AI to accelerate drug discovery by analyzing complex molecular structures.
Exactly.
Totally different ball games. Right.
Totally different ball games. And I think what's really refreshing about Polestar is that they really get that. They understand the nuance of implementing AI across diverse teams and functions. They're not just out there pushing, a one-size-fits-all approach. They really try to understand their clients' needs and tailor their solutions accordingly.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like you need a consultant.
Absolutely. I think that's a great way to put it, because that's essentially what Polestar is, right? They're AI consultants.
Yeah.
They come in, they help you figure out, what are the right problems to solve?
Yeah.
What are the right AI solutions? And then how do you actually implement those solutions effectively?
And, speaking of tailoring those solutions, let's talk about something that's absolutely critical that I think a lot of companies kind of miss in the AI race, and that is data.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Data is everything.
Chetan and Ankit are really big on this whole data is king or queen idea.
Yeah.
And for good reason.
Well, I think everyone's heard the saying garbage in, garbage out.
Right.
And that is especially true with AI, more true than it's ever been.
Right, yeah.
You can have the most sophisticated,
the fanciest algorithm.
The fanciest algorithms in the world, but if you're feeding them bad data, you're going to get inaccurate results, unreliable results, and, in some cases, potentially harmful results.
And it's not just about the numbers being a bit off, right? We're talking about real-world consequences.
Real-world consequences, exactly.
Yeah.
Think about, an AI system that's being used for loan applications.
Okay.
Right. If that system is trained on biased data, it might unfairly reject applicants from certain groups.
Right.
Right. And then that perpetuates existing inequalities.
Oh.
And it's not just, it's not just a technical glitch at that point.
Right.
That's a social justice issue.
Yeah, that's a powerful example.
Yeah.
Really highlights just how, critical data quality is in this whole AI thing.
Absolutely. And that's where data governance comes in, right?
Okay.
And Ankit was very clear about, the risks of neglecting that. He talked about how, if you don't have good data governance, you can run into all sorts of problems, from ethical dilemmas to, reputational damage,
right?
Even legal issues, regulatory fines, all sorts of nasty stuff.
So it's not just about the technology, it's about using it responsibly, really.
100%. It's about using it responsibly. And here's where I think Polestar's approach gets really interesting, because they actually advocate for a reverse approach to AI implementation.
Okay, what does that mean? Reverse approach.
So typically, what companies do is they start with use cases.
Right.
They're like, okay, we want to use AI for this, this, and this. And then they try to find data to fit those use cases.
Right.
Polestar says, no. Flip that on its head. Start with your data. Figure out what data you have. Make sure it's high quality. And then identify the best use cases based on that data.
Interesting. Okay, so it's flipping the script on how we usually think about AI projects.
Exactly. But it makes a lot of sense when you think about it, because a lot of times the data is the bottleneck.
Right.
The data quality is the biggest bottleneck in these AI projects.
It's like laying the foundation before you start building the house, right?
Exactly.
You got to make sure it's solid.
Exactly. You want to make sure the foundation is rock solid, because if it's not, everything you build on top of it is going to crumble.
Yeah, you're going to have to go back and redo it.
Exactly.
So true. Speaking of foundations, let's talk about something else that I think is, well, it's not often talked about, but it's kind of the elephant in the room, maybe, when we talk about AI, and that's the cost.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
The cost is real.
Chetan and Ankit are very upfront about this. They don't shy away from the fact that AI is expensive.
It can be very expensive.
And they say that a lot of companies really underestimate the total cost of ownership when it comes to AI.
And I think that's, it's easy to get caught up in the excitement of a new AI project.
Yeah.
But you're right, the costs can really add up.
It's not just the initial investment in the technology, right? You've got, you were talking about data. You've got to maintain that data.
The data, yeah.
You've got to maintain these models.
Model maintenance, yeah.
Make sure they're performing the way they're supposed to. Sometimes you have to like retrain them, right? With new data, new algorithms, all this stuff. And then there's the whole cost of, the whole computing resources.
AI requires a lot of computing power, which means
there's a lot.
Big cloud computing bills, specialized hardware, all that stuff.
Yeah, and then on top of that, you've got to find people who know how to do this stuff.
Yes, the talent. You can't forget about the talent.
And I mean, AI specialists, they don't come cheap.
No, they do not.
So,
And the really, really good ones are like unicorns.
Yeah, exactly. They're hard to find. And that's something else that I think Polestar does really well is they really emphasize the importance of robust AI governance to manage all these costs, right?
Absolutely. And one of the things they talked about is this idea of continuous model auditing.
Okay.
Right. So once you have your AI model up and running, you don't just want to, set it and forget it.
Right.
You need to be constantly monitoring it, making sure it's still performing the way it's supposed to be performing, making sure there's no bias creeping in.
Right.
Making sure that it's still aligned with your business goals.
Right. Kind of like building a house.
Right.
You don't just lay the foundation and then you're done.
Exactly. You've got to do the maintenance.
Right. Inspect.
You got to maybe some renovations down the line.
Right.
To keep everything in tip-top shape. And just like, you don't want your house to be vulnerable to, storms or earthquakes.
Yeah.
You need to future-proof your AI systems as well.
Future-proof your AI. Okay. So what does that actually look like?
Well, the thing is, AI isn't static. It's constantly evolving, right? So what might be considered best practice today might be outdated tomorrow. And one of the things that Chetan and Ankit really emphasized is the importance of keeping an eye on the regulatory landscape. Because, new laws, guidelines around AI, they're popping up all the time.
Yeah, it's like, how do you even keep up with all that?
It's tough, right? It's like trying to hit a moving target. And that's why, that's another reason why there's such big proponents of having that robust AI governance framework in place.
Okay.
Because that can help you adapt to those changes.
So you're kind of like building in those checks and balances from the very beginning.
Absolutely. Build it in from the start.
Yeah.
And then you have that flexibility to adapt as needed.
Makes sense. Now, speaking of adapting and kind of, looking ahead to the future of AI, they brought up this other really interesting point. And that's this idea of a chief AI officer.
The CIO.
The CIO, right.
Yep.
So you mean like a C-suite level executive?
Yeah, C-level executive.
Specifically for AI.
Specifically for AI.
That feels very future is now.
It does, doesn't it?
What would a CIO even do?
Well, so it's a relatively new concept, but it's one that I think is going to become increasingly important. As Chetan and Ankit were talking about it, they were kind of envisioning this role as working alongside the chief data officer,
right?
But with more of a specific focus on the strategic implications of AI.
So instead of just kind of like tacking AI onto existing processes,
exactly,
it's about having someone who's thinking holistically
about how AI integrates into the entire organization,
right?
Top down.
Yeah.
So the CIO would be responsible for things like, setting the overall AI strategy for the company.
Okay.
Making sure that the data quality is there, navigating all those tricky regulatory waters that we talked about. And then, perhaps most importantly, championing, ethical AI practices.
Right.
Throughout the company.
It's like having, a dedicated captain,
Yeah.
Steering the ship through uncharted territory. Which is kind of what AI is, right?
It is. It's a brave new world out there.
It is. It really is. Well, this has been, a really, really interesting conversation.
It has.
And I think it all kind of ties back to, what we were talking about with Polestar's overall philosophy, right?
Absolutely.
It's about thinking long-term, building that sustainable AI strategy. And then, most importantly, I think focusing on those, like, real business outcomes.
Exactly.
Instead of just chasing, those quick wins,
the shiny objects.
The shiny objects. Right, exactly.
Gotta ignore those shiny objects.
Ignore those shiny objects. Well, this has been a really, really insightful look, I think, at generative AI in business.
It has. It's been a great discussion.
And, I hope for those of you listening, you've walked away with some some good takeaways here. You feel a little bit better equipped.
Yeah, hopefully a little less intimidated by all the hype.
Yes, exactly. Because I think it can be really easy to get overwhelmed. But as always, keep asking those tough questions.
Absolutely.
Keep diving deeper. And until next time.